Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online lunchtime talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and living room televisions. My name is Martin O'Leary and I'm the Pervasive Media Studio's creative technologist. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. An especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio, for whom this might be the first time you're engaging with us. For all of you, here's a little bit about what we do. The Pervasive Media Studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England and the University of Bristol. We're a home for early ideas, for companies and a meeting place of both creative and commercial industries. We're a studio space, offering desk space, meeting rooms, events, opportunities, all for free for our residents. And we're a safe place for artists to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. This week's talk is part of our Future Themes season. So recently the studio funded several of our residents and their collaborators to convene deep conversations about art, technology and society. Conversations that are both hopeful and critically engaged. From now until early January, there'll be talks focusing on what has emerged from those conversations. Full details of all of the Future Themes projects are available on our website. This week's talk is by studio resident Jane Gauntlett. It's called Past, Present and Future Pleasures. Jane is a writer for film and theatre and she's collaborating with a wide team on It's Our Pleasure, a multidisciplinary experience of pleasure, community, diversity, activism and exploration. The talk should run at around 30 minutes and afterwards we'll bring in some of the wider team for a Q&A session. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them in the chat window and I'll pick them out to ask the team. Just a brief content warning, there will be some discussion of sexual themes here, but nothing detailed or graphic. A captioned version of this talk will be available here as well after the talk is finished. Next week's talk is by Stephanie Kempson and her team at Sharp Teeth Theatre, and it's called Not Our First Lockdown. They've been exploring the impacts of the pandemic on the chronically ill community and how we can take advantage of this opportunity for shared experience and understanding. They've also promised us an interactive musical, so we'll find out what they mean by that. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PMStudioUK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. Please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share this link now, it'll be live now and after the talk. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Jane Gauntlett.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Martin. As he said, my name is Jane Gauntlett. I am a writer and director. I would really like to say that I'm a magician, but I'm not. I'm working on it. For the most part, my practice explores the impact of storytelling, immersion, intimacy, shared experience, and human connection. I have a residency at the Pervasive Media Studio. I choose a story, then I explore the best platform on which to tell it. I've used theatre, audio, interactive theatre, film, game, virtual reality, and mixed reality. I am sitting at a table in a very crooked pub. The pub has been here since 1836. I'm surrounded by plants and random bits of furniture. If you look closely, there are some pork scratchings behind me. I am 39. I have brown hair, which is cut to a sharp bob. I have a short fringe. I'm wearing perhaps too much lipstick, but I like it that way. I'm wearing a shirt that is white and blue, and I have very frilly sleeves. We are being lit by old chandeliers which rattle when my washing machine is on. I've been invited to join you for lunch to talk to you about my new project, It's Our Pleasure. I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about my practice. I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about It's Our Pleasure. Then I'm going to introduce you to Natalie Scott, freelance producer, maker and co-artistic director of the Lab Collective, Emma Blackman, independent producer and founder of Emma Blackman Productions, and Amy Fleming, writer and performer. They're going to share their past, present and future projects. Then we're going to hand the microphone over to you. We are really interested in what you have to say. We will do our best to answer any questions that you might have. You might have things to say to each other. Let's open a dialogue. On that note, please do add any thoughts or questions to the chat. You are welcome to do this at any time. Back to pleasure. It's our pleasure is an exploration into past pleasures, current pleasures, and future pleasures. We are still in the initial stages of research and development. If it was just you and I sharing this space, and I asked you to talk to me about what gives you pleasure, what do you think you would say? What's the first thing that comes into your head? Over the last few weeks, I've had the pleasure of asking this of strangers and acquaintances. I've asked them questions about what they like to watch, what they like to listen to, what they like to touch, and what they like to put in their mouths. Our first lesson was that when we used the word pleasure, people immediately associated it with sexual pleasure. This led to two very different reactions. People either looked like they wanted to hide from me or jumped at the chance of sharing their sexual experiences and fantasies with me. When we changed the terminology to what brings you joy, what makes you laugh, what do you look forward to in the morning, and where would you like to be right now, as you can imagine, we got a very different reaction. This was a very important lesson for us to learn. It was our first glimpse into audience comforts and discomforts. People started to talk about the smell of their partner making coffee, getting lost in the wilderness, the gigs that they've been to which have left them feeling high, the funerals that they arrange and the tenderness and love that they experience, the things that they love to wear. This will have a huge impact on how we tailor the content to suit our audiences. It will also have an impact on how we design and tailor the online platform. Speaking of audiences and platforms, I'm going to give you a glimpse into how I found myself bang smack in the middle of the worlds of art and technology. I'm going to share 10 slides with you. Each slide is a picture of a project that I've worked on. I'm going to speak quite frankly about the figures and the experiences that I have had. I'm hoping that this will be useful. Here is a picture of me standing in a vast empty space. It's a rooftop and I am blindfolded. In the distance, there are walls which surround me. In 2009, I founded the In My Shoes project. It was a response to a traumatic brain injury which I had in 2007. The brain injury had a huge impact on my communications. I quickly picked up on how to speak. However, it took far longer for me to learn how to communicate. I started to use audio technology as an alternative method of communication. I'd create audio recordings to share my experiences from my perspective. It was an effective way to communicate with both my loved ones and my medical teams. Before the brain injury, I found pleasure in debating with my partner. Of course, this also led to arguments. I learned how to have pre-recorded arguments with my partner. This had a huge impact on my life. I saw an opportunity to share my experience of this with others. I started to collaborate with other people to record their own experiences from a first-person perspective. They own the rights to these pieces. They can share them with whoever they wish. It's now a library of 123 audio pieces. In 2011, I discovered a contraption which I had never heard of. These were called Vuzix video goggles. I started to use visuals to accompany my audio pieces. The first piece I made was called In My Shoes, Waking in Slough. It was an experience designed around an epileptic seizure that I had on a train in Slough. It used props, costumes, touch, taste, and smell in time with what was happening through the lenses. It was led by a performer. Here are two pictures of Waking in Slough. The one to the left is of a man sitting at a table wearing a headset which is being held on by a stocking. He is holding a fountain pen and writing in a notebook. At the beginning of the performance, he was given my handbag, a watch, fountain pen, a notebook, and a bottle of water. These are all featured in the film. He has just been prompted to take the notebook and pen from my bag. He is currently writing a shopping list. The one to the left is of a lady seated in a chair wearing the same goggle and stocking device. Behind her is a performer. They've been guiding her through the piece using touch, taste, and smell. They have now assumed the role of a paramedic. They are about to guide her out of the piece. They will ask her a few questions like, what is your name and where do you live? How many fingers am I holding up and have you wet yourself? They will guide her out of the experience and provide her with care and conversation if they would like that. It was filmed using a Canon D60 camera and a dictaphone, which we already owned, and 3 train tickets, which cost £52. It took myself and 2 friends 3 days to devise and make it. The headset cost around £250. Wakey and Slough has been showcased at international festivals and presented as a medical training tool. It had a very long shelf life. The last showing was in 2018. That's 7 years of festivals and universities. The first pair of headsets that I owned broke in the middle of an online demonstration. It felt like the stage had collapsed. Those headsets now live in a very large glass jar, similar to the jars that we might find in a museum. Though this one isn't filled with formaldehyde and organs. In the tech world, they are quite retro. Perhaps they're unique antiques. In 2015, I started to make work using virtual reality headsets. My first piece was called In My Shoes, Dancing with Myself. It was another piece designed around an epileptic seizure that I had. This time it was in a restaurant. The picture shows the piece from inside the headset. I'm sitting at a table in a restaurant. It's one of those restaurants with round tables and white tablecloths. More trendy than fancy, really. You can't see my face because the piece is shot from my perspective. If you look down, you can see my hands on the table. My fingernails are painted red. I'm holding a menu. There is a tumbler of wine next to my right hand and a small silver metal bucket filled with cutlery and napkins. Originally, it was designed for a medical conference in Philadelphia. We hadn't even considered that it might go elsewhere. We did a demonstration at a VR event, which was quite an eye-opener. People kept asking me about my boss. They kept talking over me to my male counterparts. One even asked me for a cup of tea before I got onto the stage. It was picked up by Sheffield Doc Fest and was shown at festivals and used as a training tool all over the world. It was a whirlwind. It was a lesson in different audiences and different approaches. This project taught me that it was possible to license my work. It taught me to ask people for money when people asked me to speak. It taught me that sometimes people will pay freelancers even if they don't pay people from large organizations. It became a case of treading the line between exposure and exploitation. It taught me that some people pay access fees and that some people don't. This next picture shows the piece at a performance. It is taken from outside the headset. There is a small room of 6 people sitting at round tables with white tablecloths. They're wearing virtual reality headsets which look like plastic oblong boxes attached to their faces. The people are holding menus. There is usually a tumbler of wine next to their right hands and a silver metal bucket filled with cutlery and napkins to match the set. At this venue, the tables were too small for them. Sometimes we have to improvise. Okay, so I don't always make work about myself. I am committed to caring for the people that I collaborate with. When I'm exploring new platforms, I start with my own story until I understand how the process works. I learned from first-hand experience what it is like to have my story told by other people. In 2008, a documentary was made about my experience of being mugged and living with a brain injury. The other person it features is somebody who had a history of mugging other people. I found words being used about me that I didn't associate with, such as victim. I found the attention quite overwhelming. I found words being used about me that I didn't associate with. More words that I didn't associate with. I was often stopped in the street and asked about my experience. To be quite honest, people were very kind, I just wasn't prepared for it. I'd been out of hospital for less than a year and I was still very vulnerable. I am really glad that I did it, and it's informed my practice and delivery. I would like to introduce you to intimacy. The next picture shows 2 people sitting next to each other. Their heads are facing each other and they have the same oblong boxes strapped to their heads. One of the most delicious lessons that I learned making Wakey and Slough and Dancing myself was about the currency of storytelling. The way that people looked after me after they'd taken off the headset was quite extraordinary. The moments of silence, the moments of tears, the open arms, the open minds, and the open hearts. And of course, the confessions. People shared their experiences with me. They told me about their own experiences and challenges. somebody confessed to a crime that they'd committed. I bump into people at events, and it is as if they know me, as though we share a secret that nobody else knows. I wanted to explore whether I could share this experience with other people without them having to put themselves on the line by sharing their own experiences. I decided to make a multi-user experience, which is called Intimacy. It's designed for 2 participants. The participants are invited to take off their coats and their shoes if they'd like to. They are then invited to sit next to each other on a sofa. It's a 10-minute piece which shares 3 different experiences from 6 different perspectives. The first is an experience of strangers who meet on a train. The second is a piece about a couple in a long-term relationship. The third is about a very, very awkward Tinder date. I learned that it's very hard to make people relax wearing a headset. I found it very hard to make people laugh. I am trying to blame it on the fact that people immediately tense up and become very self-conscious. It can't be the fact that I'm just not funny. I do, of course, take responsibility for that. However, I do think that the barrier of technology does have an impact of sorts. The highlight of showcasing this project was watching people piece together their experiences, watching them laugh once they had moved through a headset, watching them leave together. I know that one person employed the person that they met on the sofa. I know that 2 other people dated. I don't know how long for though. Working VR was an expensive feat, quite different to the days of making a piece with an old headset, a stocking and a Canon D60 camera and 3 train tickets. To give you a frank insight, for Dancing with Myself, I paid a VR studio to film and edit the piece. It cost £17,000. This was in 2015. There are far more resources available now, but still. Working on autobiographical documentary pieces flooded me with a minefield of ethical challenges. I guess the experience of having had my story told by others, having made work about myself, and having made work about other people, and having been so close to my audiences for 10 years made me quite sensitive to the field and every stage of the process. I worked on a few more pieces which used virtual reality headsets. One of the highlights of using virtual reality as a platform was a private commission with a couple who wanted to explore experiencing pleasure from the perspective of the other. Of course, it was a somewhat playful experiment. It was naked, it was honest, it was unedited, and we had a lot of fun. I would like to introduce you to your true love. This is how I would have approached you if you had come to see this piece. It was a tongue-in-cheek piece about the impact of technology on future relationships. Here are 2 pictures. They both feature 2 women sitting opposite each other at a table. They're in a restaurant and both are wearing huge, odd-looking glasses. Both have a large glass of wine on the table in front of them. In one of the pictures, they are holding hands. Participants were met and teased with the idea that we could match their data with the danger and data of strangers, and in doing so, we would be able to introduce them to their true love. It was a playful piece designed for 2 people, 1 performer and 1 participant. I would take them to a table and guide them into putting on a headset. Through the headset, they were still able to see me. They could also see what appeared to be my data layered over the top. I told them that their date was nervous and that they would be with them shortly. The data in the headset showed the logo for True Love and You Have Been Matched. They then had somebody urinating and swearing. They had footsteps coming towards them. Sorry, I've got flies, the joys of working, the joys of living above a pub. The date arrived somewhat sheepishly. It was the role of the participant to comfort them and to tell them that it was okay. We were exploring ways to take away the formality of the performer and the participant. It was all improvised. They spent up to half an hour together getting to know each other. I hung around at the bar trying not to watch. Sometimes people approached me afterwards to chat to me. And the highlights were that there were people coming to chat to me. There was a lady in her 80s that told me that she hadn't felt so sexy in 40 years and that she would consider online dating. and when a young man told me that he had never considered dating a man before, but that he might be wrong. After this, I began to think about where I wanted to go next. Working with these types of headsets had an impact on the experiences that I wanted to make and how I wanted to make them. In this picture, I am sitting on a stage next to 3 other people. We are on a panel. There is a large screen behind us which says Central Experiences in VR, Opportunities, Challenges and Ethics, written next to the logo for Raindance Film Festival. It also has the names of the other panelists. Our host is Catherine Allen, and we are joined by Jennifer Lyon-Bell and Anne de Winter. I'm sitting on a chair and I am cross-legged. I'm holding a hardback notebook. I'm sitting next to a hat stand on which my jacket is placed, and I have stockinged feet. For some reason, I asked a friend to carry the hat stand on stage, take my jacket and remove my shoes. I must confess that I can't remember why. So much of the budget was put into the technology and the developers. For True Love, we could only afford the developers for 2 half days. This came to just under £1,000. However hard we tried to design the budget, I was unable to treat the people who were working on the project, the people whose stories we were telling, and the participants with the respect and accessibility costs and care that I wished to. I don't see access as an afterthought. I must add that when I founded the In My Shoes project, I hadn't thought of the word empathy. This came later. I began to find the terminology that I was using uncomfortable. I don't believe that we can ever be in somebody else's shoes in this context. They just don't fit. We will never have shared past experiences, their delights and their triggers. People tend to walk in the same shoes for a while. They adjust, they take us on fabulous and terrible journeys, and they break. I've told you about a few of my projects and the highlights and challenges. This is because they have influenced the Pleasure Project. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and the lessons that I've learned. I will touch upon the current ethical challenges in the next chapter of this talk. Okay, so I have shared a few stories of the past. Now for a glimpse into the current. In the next picture, you are looking through a peephole. You can see a path running through an avenue of trees with a city landscape in the background. A domed cathedral dominates the city landscape. There's a glitter ball dangling from the highest trees and playing cards falling from the sky. At the end of the avenue, there appears to be a party afoot, a party that belongs in the 1920s. Close to the front are a pair of high rainbow stilettos peeping out of bath bubbles. The bubbles are floating through the air past a rather large hummingbird. The rear end of a zebra is peeping from a hedge and a fish is floating above it. There is a family of rubber ducks moving across the path. It's Our Pleasure has been quietly simmering since 2019. I didn't have a name for it though. I was in the process of developing True Love, and once we learned how much it would cost us to scale it up, I decided to explore using different concepts and platforms based on what we had learned. I did a 1-day workshop with an organisation called Ducky. This was at the British Museum. We were given access to the archives, showed a study of tentacle porn, otherwise known as shunga. I did a 2-day workshop at the Wellcome Trust. We were given access to the archives. We had the choice of what we wanted to explore. I was introduced to the technology of orgasm. I put the concept to sleep until June 2020. 3 months into lockdown, I started to think about the pleasures of the everyday. It's Our Pleasure is a combination of all of the things I have learned along the way. Last year, I had the pleasure of meeting Amma Josephine Budge. She taught me about the concepts of pleasure activism and the politics of feeling good, which is a book by Adrienne Marie Brown. To quote Adrienne, it's about the politics of healing and happiness that explodes the Tao myth that changing the world is just another form of work. It's Our Pleasure was conceived following a 3-day workshop with the Southwest Creative Technology Network. We were often split into small groups and asked to share ideas in which we might use technology as a platform. The project that I dreamed of making was a pleasure gun, a contraption that we could use to give pleasureful thoughts to passers-by. I haven't sussed out a way to do this yet, but fingers crossed it will be the next stage of the It's Our Pleasure project. Now that the project has a small amount of traction, I have a small team, and I'm delighted to say that I can now use the word we. We are currently talking to fabulous artists about how we might collaborate. Behind the scenes of this project, we are met with the following questions. How do we take care of a remote production team and a team of collaborative artists? We're exploring ways to design a healthy, accessible work environment. How do we take care of a remote audience? Our backgrounds are in theatre, interactive theatre, and intimate experiences using technology for small groups of participants. A lot of care and attention has gone into how to support participants if we can touch, taste, hear, and even smell them, but how do we take care of them when they are in their own homes? How can audiences give us their consent? How can we get audiences to invest in our work? By this, I mean invested in the characters, the stories, and what is going on around them. How can we collaborate with a team of artists to make their own work which can be licensed outside of our pleasure? For example, films or performances which stand alone as a piece of work, something which has both a life and an income of its own. So that is where we are. I would like to give you a peek into the future. This picture is a triptych of black and white images in portrait orientation from the 1920s. The first image on the left is of a postman in full uniform collecting post from a postbox and putting it in his sack. The middle image is of a group of people at a party. They are standing at various levels and some are sitting in each other's laps. They are dressed in formal wear and some are in fancy dress, including a bellhop and a sailor. The third image is of a female telephone operator who is processing a call. Please take a moment to imagine that you heard about the project somewhere and that you decided to buy a ticket. You choose a date. If you choose to, then you can answer a couple of questions. For example, do you like to lead a dance or to be led? You're also given the option to share the address. Your address, sorry, not the address, your address. You are now a member of an underground community. I shall start by telling you that you are very welcome here. The community is a community of musicians, gardeners, magicians, depressives, dancers, parents, grandparents, nurses, wallflowers, circus performers, and activists. It's not about labels or professions, preferences, or qualifications. It's about sharing pleasures. It's a community of the open and the curious. People who find pleasure in breaking boundaries. People who find pleasure in being participatory or in being a voyeur. Anything goes, but nothing will happen without your consent. If you shared your address, then you'll receive a parcel in the post. It's filled with multisensory clues as to where the experience is going to take you. You might receive other letters, ones which introduce you to the characters that you are likely to meet when you arrive at the club. Right, so we get to opening night. You might find us in your bedroom, you might find us in a pub, you might find us in a local forest, in a gallery, or in a palace. You might find us in an abandoned public toilet, you know, the ones which are situated in the middle of pavements. Wherever we are welcome, you are welcome. It is a safe space, it is an accessible space, a space where you are welcome and you needn't worry if somebody is watching you. Will you give your consent to partake, or will you take the role of a voyeur? Of course, you can change your mind whenever you like. Like I said, anything goes. It's a space in which you can explore as you wish. What tickles your fancy? In the main space, there is a performance which you're invited to dip in and out of. If and when you choose to explore, there are hidden doors that you can push and that they will open. You might find a garden, a musician, a place to rest and listen to people's conversations. You might be able to identify the people that wrote to you. There are keyholes and peepholes. You might find a magician, somebody sharing their stories of activism, things that have happened and things that they dream will happen. You might find a burlesque performer, a breakdancer, a circus performer, or people sharing their preferences and pleasures. Back to whatever tickles your fancy. There is an ongoing narrative of love, protestation, pleasure, human rights, and play in the bar. You have free roam as to whether you get involved and how you navigate the space. Pleasure takes many forms. Back to the concept of spaces in which this piece may inhabit, I dream of it being transferable. I've used the concept of it being in a bar as an example. I would like the piece to give you wonder, to experience the unexpected, and to leave you feeling curious, empowered, and fabulous with a delicious taste in your mouth. I'd like you to feel the way that you do when you leave a great party, a great library, or have just finished a great cup of tea. I'd like you to leave feeling both adoring and adored. Most of all, I would like you to leave feeling pleasured. I would like to give you license to take more pleasure. You deserve to take pleasure. Everyone has the right to take pleasure, not just on special occasions. If you choose to stay a member, then you might receive a call, another treasure in the post. You are not just a one-night stand. Once a member of our community, you are always a member of our community. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you. Oh, I should perhaps add that this is the concept, the experience that we would like to create, the world we would like to invite you to. Of course, we can't promise to deliver all of these things, but we can promise to try. I'm curious, if it was just you and I sharing this space and I asked you to talk to me about what gives you pleasure, what do you think you would say? What is the first thing that comes into your head? Do you think that you would give me the same answers? Right. So I've had quite enough of the sound of my own voice now, and my use of the word I. Please welcome Amy, Emma, and Natalie to the conversation.
Thanks, Jane. That's been great, and great to see the whole team here, or at least some of you. I was wondering if it would be possible for each of you to introduce yourselves a little and maybe talk a bit about your role in this project. So maybe Amy, if you want to go first.
Working on a project called Vector, which is about animals.
Sorry, Amy, I'm just going to interrupt you. There's been a little technical problem, and
okay.
Nobody was able to hear anything you said up until just now.
Oh, okay.
I'm very sorry about that.
No, it's great. They got to see my enthusiasm. So I'll go back to the beginning. So for anyone that didn't hear, I was just giving a description of what I looked like. So I'm wearing a black high-collared dress with flowers on it. I've got long blonde mousy brown hair, and I've got some blue over the ear headphones. I'm currently sitting in my childhood bedroom, and I've got some cream wardrobes behind me and some flowered wallpaper on the wall. I am a writer and performer, mainly in interactive and immersive theatre. So anything from one-on-one experiences, murder mysteries in museums, Boomtown Festival, playing a judge, bringing people around the Crystal Maze, playing a witch in Nightmare Live. So a whole host of different things, different scales of audiences. This year is the first time that I've started to bring that work online, which, as you can imagine, in interactive theatre, it's a lot about talking to the audience and being right there with them. So that's been a bit of a difficult shift, but lots of exciting projects happening. I'm working with Natalie, who you will hear from in a bit, on a brilliant project called Vector, which we actually started developing before 2020 around animal testing. But I think Natalie will speak more about that. And that's the first time that I've performed really with an app and technology being a big factor in the performance. So also working alongside tech in in a way that I never have before. So that's been really exciting. I'm also an associate artist with a company called 6 Foot Stories, and we're developing an adaptation of The Tempest, and we're also looking at a story between Elizabeth I and Gráinne Whale, who is known as the Irish Pirate Queen. So that's been kicking off. And I also work with a company called Degenerate Fox, who are a company of neo-futurists in London. And we're actually bringing our show online. So we did the first show in September. And the idea is that we perform 30 plays in 1 hour, which you can imagine is a lot of chaos. But we've brought it online and it's been so much fun. Our tech is in Peru, so we're working internationally. And I'm doing my first ever one in December. So I'm super excited about that at the minute. And obviously I've been working on It's Our Pleasure. I've been involved since kind of the initial concept with Jane, working as her PA, partner in crime. And hopefully as the idea progresses, I'll be taking on a performance role as well as that job, which I'm really, really excited about. And I get to play with audiences, which is my favorite thing in the world. And I'm going to pass you over to Emma.
Emma, you're on mute. Not having great audio luck today.
Before. Hi everyone, I'm Emma Blackman. I am sitting in a room with white walls and high ceilings. There's a lamp and a plant in my background. I'm wearing a navy jumpsuit and I'm a woman who ticks the white other box in the equal opportunity monitoring forms. And I have brown shoulder length hair and blue-green eyes. I am a creative independent producer and founder of Emma Blackman Productions. I come from a background of performance and I've previously worked in the subsidised theatre sector for 5 years. Supported by Stage One, Emma Blackman Productions was launched in 2018 to focus on championing and celebrating female creatives in the theatre and offering a stage to female voices. I am passionate about producing high quality and accessible work based on exciting and less heard stories. And I do that across a range of forms, from new writing to gig theatre and immersive and interactive shows. I think the thing that I've been interrogating the most since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis is a way to create theatre online. So the magic for theatre for me has always been the live event, the one-off event, the running from the toilets because the tannoys have become a bit more harsh and the lights are dimming slowly and I have to get to my seat. That kind of idea that whatever happens on a Friday night in the middle of November on that stage will never ever happen again. And I'm trying now, as we find ourselves in the digital world, try to understand, how do you invite audiences to immerse themselves in a fully theatrical one-off experience that's happening on a laptop? How do you make that interaction between the happening and the audience member give pleasure and give those real life excitements and slight panics when you're running from your toilet seat? Things that I have explored for the first time in terms of digital work was the recently finished press play season that was created and commissioned by Populay. They are creating audio plays and new films, and we did a digital community project over in Bristol, and it was wonderful to imagine together a world where you can get that satisfaction and that pleasure from theatre which is happening on the digital realm. And that is very exciting for me when we think about peepholes, for instance, with It's Our Pleasure. I'm going to pass you over to Natalie Scott.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I am short and have very curly hair. It's brown and I'm wearing a round necked blue kind of dressy, tunicky, jobby thing. I'm sitting in my bedroom. There is behind me in the corner a unicorn balloon that was delivered for my friend's, for my partner's birthday. as well as a portrait of me and that person next to my door. The room is what one would call organised chaos. There's quite a lot of clutter behind me, a shelving unit, a lamp, fake flower, and a real cactus, as well as a rather rumpled bed. I've known Jane for quite a long time, 10 years almost, but we haven't quite worked together in the way that we're working together right now, although our interests have kind of run parallel for quite some time. I first met Jane at this delicatessen in 2010, and our kind of interests converge in terms of games, technology, and kind of playable performance. How can mechanics generate something that an audience can play within? And as artistic director of the Lab Collective, that's something that we've been working on for almost a decade. And very recently, kind of, well, maybe for the last 3 years, really, maybe 4, thinking about how that integration of kind of digital technology can kind of impact and make a performance feel very live and make an audience feel like they have a footprint on the work that we're making. And often the tech that we use is free. So, you know, we've used free polling software. We kind of use like kind of QLab that's not quite as free, but that we can build in kind of interactive elements into. And most recently, obviously working with Amy on Vector, which we've been doing with the Wellcome Trust for the last couple of years, which is prophetically about the use of animal research in a medical context relating to a pandemic. It was creepily, quite creepily, like, it's become very real. So we're exploring how we reframe and shape those ideas in this context, that what was a world that we had built into a world that we're now living in. And I think I'm really drawn to Jane's kind of ideas of kind of pleasure, given the restraints that people are experiencing and the impact on people's mental health that has. I think pleasure is something we need to be reminded of all the time to take, as Jane does. We often start our conversation with, Natalie, tell me what has given you pleasure in the last 24 hours. And actually that kind of reminder is a kind of positive reinforcement. And I think that this exploration of pleasure in a performative way can help bring that back to the surface and give people a moment of relief in what is a really quite harrowing moment in our in our lives. So yeah, I'm really excited to be working on this with Jane.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to ask a question first, Jane. So you've made a lot of work which has been sort of digitally mediated, but it tends to be sort of quite physical, quite physically intimate. How have you found working on this sort of thing since the pandemic started and we're all, dispersed in 5 different locations here? And has there been any work since March which you've thought has handled that really well?
Okay, so since the lockdown, I've had to decided to take a very different approach. I think it's going to be a while before people will put on headsets. I know there have been festivals that have used headsets. One of the things that has brought me the most pleasure is I sometimes read people bedtime stories. So I put a screen on the pillow next to me and I read them stories. The privilege of watching people go to sleep is intimate. And a real privilege. In terms of it's our pleasure, ethics is a real problem. I think, sort of as I said, I think being able to watch people and keep an eye on them. I think there's something that I'm really nervous about is leaving people in their rooms after they've watched something. The best piece of work that I've seen recently is I saw Crave by Sarah Kane at the Chichester Festival Theatre, and I just really liked the way that the set and the lighting was used. I thought it was cleverly done for a live performance and for a digital performance, which I think is a big challenge. Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything anyone else would like to add to that? Or not? That's fine.
I think there's like a big plethora of work that has kind of emerged especially at the beginning of lockdown, there was kind of quite a rush to get out kind of digital online versions. And I think what struck me at the time was that the rush to do it, for me, really hampered a lot of the quality of the work. You know, there was some of the work I was seeing, there was a real lack of process. And actually what I kind of have enjoyed is work that maybe has emerged a little bit later and has taken its time to kind of think about how you use platforms and what platforms can do. You know, how can you use multiple platforms to create something that is a little bit more dynamic? But obviously, you know, early work is always going to be there, and it's always going to be kind of what starts something off. I particularly enjoyed, I enjoyed, there were three shows. So I really enjoyed Darkfield Radio, which is an audio experience designed for two at a kitchen table. And each show has that kind of convention of it's you and a partner, you and a person, or you and a housemate with a set of headphones on. And it's a very intimate binaural sound-led experience. And the first one I saw was I heard was quite terrifying, actually. And I was like, oh, this might be a bit too much for where I'm at right now. But actually that kind of visceral experience and kind of quite physical experience from a piece of technology was something I found fascinating, and something that was transporting, but wasn't necessarily delivered in a very conventional Zoom setup or a kind of OBS driven interactive online experience. So yeah, for me, like Darkfield and Darkfield Radio is something that's quite chef's kiss.
One thing I'm really enjoying about a lot of the online work I'm seeing is the chat function, because so often in a lot of traditional theatre or even immersive, you very rarely are talking to your audience. You're either talking to a performer or you're sitting and watching. And the chat function has just been so great in people are reacting and immediately sharing their feelings of a piece that you normally would say save for the bar afterwards. But it's kind of happening live, and the audience are having this whole new experience online, which me as an audience member, I've really enjoyed. So I think that's something that's going to be interesting for us to think about, either as we move away from online or as we continue to work in this way. How can we build on that experience? I think is a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think there's also something about the invitation to engage with theatre online, which I just noticed as myself as a digital theatre consumer, of when do I feel engaged, or when do I feel that I can just check my mobile phone while somebody is performing on my laptop, and what structures could be in place to make me feel as though this is theatre and this is happening now, and I should have or choose to have that same active listening, active viewing kind of mode that I used to have when I sat amongst strangers in a dark room. And I think that very much like Natalie said before, in terms of the response at the beginning, was you saw a bit of the panic and what are we going to do now? God save us, how do we do this? And I think there was that article that came out in the Medium about why should I watch a Hedda Gabler reading if there's Tiger King on Netflix? Gosh, Tiger King, that feels like ages ago. But there is something about understanding that theatre online is a different quality to film. And people have got their heads around this kind of, we're aware that we are not videographers, we didn't study film. What can we add to this digital sphere, which is really interesting at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I very recently worked on Punch Drunk's The Third Day live broadcast that was attached to kind of Sky and HBO's The Third Day TV programme. And that was a 12-hour durational live stream on the island of Osea. And I think that, I think Emma, you totally hit something there with like, what is the difference? what am I watching? I'm watching theatre presented as television that I know is live. I watched someone fall off a massive pole into the freezing sea in October, you know, and I think there was this kind of, you know, a bit, you know, I kind of have quite mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I think that, you know, there is something quite exciting about watching something live on a site that feels risky, that feels kind of exciting, but at the same point, I also miss the interactive quality of that work in an immersive context. And I think it's really hard to extract the idea of going, what is the new thing we're making? And I think there's something really interesting about how It's Our Pleasure sort of seeks to bridge that divide by going, you're watching something that's extremely live in an online context, but you know that the audience who are there are experiencing the thing. And that kind of three-way interaction of how does one influence the other? How does the live audience influence the online audience and vice versa? And the performance that sits in the middle of that as a catalyst to all of these things, I think is something that's quite exciting and very new in a lot of ways within kind of a theatrical context, definitely. So yeah, I'm really excited by this kind of convergence of form and how the technology and how the digital realm can be really active and really well thought out with that. You know, it's not a scary piece of technology we're looking to develop. It should be user-friendly and accessible and democratizing, not you have to have a £600 headset to experience it. And yeah, I think in that way, there's a great equalizer there and a great way of reaching audiences who probably wouldn't go to it in person, couldn't afford the train fare. So yeah, I'm really excited by how this is starting to kind of converge.
I think something you're saying there speaks really well actually to the next question, which is from Frances Bossum in the chat. She's asking, how is live online performance shifting performers' pleasure and their relationship with the audience?
I'm sensing I'll answer this one.
Go for it.
It's weird. I'm not going to lie. So far, my experience of it have been quite strange, because you're so used to, even if the audience doesn't speak, there's like a hum of an audience. There's like a buzz that you pick up on, and you know where to pitch, you know what tone to go for. You know when people aren't with you, you know when they are. So missing that is quite tricky. But at the same time, it's really exciting to know that my family in Ireland can now watch my shows, because living in London the last 10 years, like they can't fly over for my shows. They, you know, and it's amazing that more of our work can be seen. And I'm really excited by It's Our Pleasure and how we're thinking of that we can have those interactive moments with audiences. So that it kind of brings back that liveness aspect to it, rather than just performing to kind of what feels like dead space, because often you don't get to see the chat while you're performing. Whereas I think if I could see the chat, I could interact with the chat, and that would be great. I do a show called Nightmare Live, and we've been doing a couple of corporate jobs, so it's only like 20 people from a team, and that's great because they can all have their videos on, and we can chat away, and that's been really a really fun experience. But that's kind of my personal take on it. It's a bit weird, but it's kind of exciting at the same time.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to chip in on that one, or?
I suppose just to talk about the liveness, in Press Play that I mentioned before, part of our community project was we worked with Zara, who are chocolatiers in Bristol, and they delivered chocolate, really tasty chocolate apparently. I don't live in Bristol, so I didn't get to taste it. Not bitter or anything. And they delivered chocolate to everyone who bought a ticket, and the play that was written by TJ Demmer, they were asked to eat the chocolate during certain places of the audio play to get that kind of liveness, to get that kind of, we're all experiencing this in sort of the same way. So again, the performers, they were just in a recording booth. They didn't get that, but there was something about the liveness that we were trying to get, at least in the second step of the piece.
just to bounce off that, Emma, the company I work with, Degenerate Fox, I mentioned before, we work in neo-futurism, which means we are us, where we are is where we are. So there's no artifice. So some of the plays involve the audience getting to do things. So like there could be a game and they will play along with it. We write new plays every time, so it kind of varies. But we do sort of get the audience involved in that, and things are happening in the now and are referenced that way. As opposed to a script and something going wrong and no one mentioning it, moving on. So I think that adds to the feeling of liveness for that particular audience as well, just that particular style of theatre.
I mean, I think you hand over to the audience in a different way, right? Because you give them agency to do whatever they will do whilst watching in a totally different way than in a live space. There's a really great Sylvia McCurley from Shunt did a show that where you go into your bathtub and you have a pair of goggles and a swimsuit on. You run yourself like a bath and you submerge yourself and you're listening to this audio piece. And actually what, the difference there really is like, what are we inviting audiences to do that aren't about how you interact with them as a performer? The performer serves the piece in a totally different way because you're going, do this for yourself whilst I engage with you. Not, I am doing something for you to engage you. And it's a really different dynamic. And I think it's about embracing that and relinquishing that kind of performative ego, which is very much around, I want to say my thing, or I've had this thing that I have to say to you in order for you to feel what I want you to. Whereas actually, if you're going, audience, take responsibility for your experience and let me guide you, it's a really different, you're asking something totally different of them. And I think that's fascinating in this kind of new, context of COVID forward in performance, because I think that's what it is. That's what's being demanded of us as makers. And I think it's a totally different discipline that we're starting to uncover. I think it's really exciting.
And I think there is that thing, for instance, Amy, you've spoken about reaching international audiences, but also I think in terms of budgeting shows now, because of COVID, you can say, okay, this is going to be a one-on-one performance, which normally you used to say, no, that's not going to work. We have to shift in so many audience members. And COVID has allowed us to take a step back and actually go, this is what we can do. And oh my God, this is so beautiful. Hooray. So yeah, they're really exciting things that are happening in the future, especially when it comes to immersive and interactive.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question, and this is from innate.uk.com. Taking it back to talking about pleasure, they say, I love the way that you're bringing together immersive experience and pleasure. Do you find that pleasure is always an immersive experience itself, immersed in a sense or many senses? A bit philosophical there, maybe. Anybody?
Yes, I think.
Good answer.
I think I get frustrated sometimes when the word immersive is used with performances, and I think that I'd probably get slapped for saying I did an immersion fellowship with SWCTN and Watershed, and it's kind of, I don't know, one of my thoughts on that word is if I have to tell somebody it's immersive, is it? But of course there's a place for that word when you're telling somebody about your work. But yeah, I think pleasure and immersion, yeah. Did that answer the question or did I go off?
No, I think that's, yes is a perfectly valid answer.
Yeah, I think pleasure is immersive, basically.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think often the moments that give you pleasure are almost the moments where you allow yourself to indulge in whatever, the taste, the smell, that thing. You just, you do get lost in it completely. And I guess, the word immersion is an apt one for that sort of experience. But yeah, Jane, you're so right. The terminology around a lot of immersive work and stuff is a whole other conversation, everybody. But yeah, I think the sense of it consuming you and immersing yourself in those lovely moments is a really nice one.
I think one of the things about pleasure is that it can creep up on you. You know, you can suddenly smell something, you can suddenly hear something, you can suddenly taste something, and I think that's really delicious.
I think that's a good word to end on, delicious. Thank you all very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'll get cut us off now because it is well past 2:00. We've talked too long. Before you all go, let me remind you, next week's talk is by Stephanie Kempson and her team at Shaft Theatre. It's called Not Our First Lockdown. They've been exploring the impacts of the pandemic on the chronically ill community and how we can take advantage of this opportunity for shared experience and understanding. And they've also promised us an interactive musical, so tune in to find out what that's about. You can get news on all of our future talks by following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. Subscribe to our newsletter on our website, and please don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Do it right now this second, or else you'll forget. Give this video a thumbs up. More subscribers we get, more likes we get, more we can share stories like this. Please also feel free to share this link now. You can rewind, watch the whole thing. Captioned version will be available to watch shortly after we finish up. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all again here next week.